The League of Women Voters is a respected, nonpartisan organization that offers people who care about their communities and about government a way to get involved in a meaningful way.
The League of Women Voters is important to me because it engages our residents in our democracy.
The League of Women Voters is making a difference.
The soul of the United States.
The League of Women Voters is critical to the future of voting rights and to women's rights.
The League of Women Voters is political, not partisan, and there's definitely a difference.
The League of Women Voters emerged from the prolonged campaign for women's suffrage, with roots tracing back to a revolutionary moment in 1848 when women publicly demanded their right to vote. Their brazen declaration set in motion a social movement of unprecedented influence. Over the next 72 years, the fight for suffrage was waged by remarkable women in national and state-level campaigns. They engaged, educated, agitated, and pleaded with fellow citizens, state legislators, and the National Congress in an unrelenting fight to gain access to public enfranchisement. Against the backdrop of the national narrative of women's suffrage played the struggles of Wisconsin women in their fight for state suffrage.
My grandmother was a suffragist. And in 1974, when I was 19 years old, she said to me, "You have to vote." She goes, "I worked really hard to make sure that you got the right to vote, and that you get to keep the right to vote is your responsibility." And so finding an organization like the League to be able to pass that on to my daughter, I want her to have the knowledge that it's been in our family a really long time, the importance of voting and the value of voting and being engaged in the voting process.
Wisconsin women employed strategies used by the National American Women's Suffrage Association, but despite relentless advocacy, failed to win state suffrage. It came when the 19th Amendment resolution passed Congress and achieved certification on August 26, 1920. It brought with it a surprising victory, as Wisconsin became the first state to officially file 19th Amendment ratification papers on June 10, 1919. In the heat of the ratification process, Ripon-born suffrage leader Carrie Chapman Catt proposed that a League of Women Voters be formed as a living memorial to the first generation of suffrage pioneers. The National League was recognized on February 14, 1920. Wisconsin followed suit, and on February 20th, 1920, changed the name of the State Suffrage Association to the Wisconsin League of Women Voters. Jesse Jack Hooper of Oshkosh, suffragist, Native American advocate, and skilled lobbyist, was elected president. Announcing the State League's first convention in 1921, Jesse Jack Hooper wrote, "Heed the call. The League is established. The League has power. How best shall we use this power to become a vital and helping force in our state and nation? How best continue in the work of educating a conscientious, well-informed electorate?" Today, and over the past 100 years, the State League has answered these questions by adopting studied policy positions, publicly advocating for them, and vigilantly acting in defense of voting rights and protections. The early League emphasized citizenship schools for newly enfranchised women voters and appointed state-level committees to address progressive issues. Among them, child welfare, early education, the protection of women in industry, and post-war disarmament. Early on, the League also turned its attention to the controversial issue of women's equality under the law. In 1923, following the introduction of the National Equal Rights Amendment, the State League argued against it, believing its blanketing effect would threaten protections already won for women. This was in contrast to their earlier support for Wisconsin's first-in-the-nation Equal Rights Bill passed in 1921, although that law proved mostly ineffective. As more women entered the workplace, facing new discriminations in the 1960s, the League's position on the national ERA evolved into strong support.
I'm Nancy Hill. I live in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I've been a member of League since the early 70s,
and became really involved in League because of a wonderful mentor named Shirley Haas, who told me I had to belong. And somewhere in there, either just before or just afterwards, there was a wonderful ERA march in Chicago. And it was transformative. I went down there on the bus early in the morning and came back late at night, but saw people that I never expected to join shoulder to shoulder with women on a beautiful Chicago day, trying to get the ERA passed. A joyful day, but we knew it was an uphill battle.
Although national ratification has not yet been realized, in Wisconsin, members led a statewide initiative endorsing a meaningful state equal rights amendment signed into law by Governor Patrick Lucey in 1975. In addition to the ERA, redistricting's effect on political power captured the League's attention. By the 1970s, the League adopted a position demanding voting maps be drawn by an independent entity. Ever since, and with escalating priority, the League has stood for fair maps while facing opposition from all sides.
The League's work on redistricting is so important, and in this world of where data are so easily sifted and resorted and so forth, they have taken gerrymandering to an art, and somebody has to stand up for for responsible districts so that when a person votes, they know that their vote matters. And the League has an important role in that, in part because, as I said, that's one where I've seen the League's position, which has not changed significantly since the 1970s. And I've seen it lined up with the Republicans, and now it's lined up in our state with the Democrats. However, leagues in other states are fighting Democratic gerrymandering. So that's one where the League's nonpartisan policy is really important, because because as a nonpartisan organization, we can fight gerrymandering no matter who does it.
The League's advocacy for fair maps couldn't be more critical today after the Supreme Court in 2019 ruled that federal courts cannot stop partisan gerrymandering.
Lawmakers in the Wisconsin Capitol need to be accountable to voters to support this legislation that will take the power of map drawing out of partisan control and give it to an independent body with plenty of public input in the interest of fairness and democracy.
Another enduring legacy of the State League's advocacy work has been its steadfast support for full suffrage and fair access to the polls that continues today.
Not everyone who's eligible to vote is represented in our current government, and it's because not everyone who's eligible to vote is voting or is necessarily able to vote right now. And I think that the League is working on improving that and making it so more people have access to the ballot box, but I think that there's even more that we can do, and I guess that's the impact that I'm hoping the League can make.
Although the 19th Amendment was a landmark moment in voter equality, it did not give the right to vote to all women. Japanese, Asian Indian, Chinese American, Filipino, and Native American women were not eligible to become naturalized and therefore could not vote in 1920, while Black women faced discrimination and racism at the polls in the Jim Crow South.
I think that's a very inspiring history. And when you think of what it took for women to get the vote and what it has taken to have the voting rights increased and to do away with some of the Jim Crow laws. I grew up in the South where we had a poll tax.
Wisconsin women helped carry the baton for full suffrage using the power of their lobbying and vote in support of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which outlawed voting discrimination based on race and color. And for the past 100 years, the League has kept a watchful eye on voter suppression tactics, knowing how quickly progress can be lost. In 2011, when the Wisconsin legislature passed a photo ID law which placed unfair burden on those who do not have a driver's license, in particular the elderly and people with disabilities, the Wisconsin League took action.
When I became president of the League of Wisconsin, I decided, and then had, of course, the support of the board, that we should be the plaintiffs in the case challenging the voter ID law that went into effect in 2011. Again, at that time, we had no money for a case, and the legal counsel had told us it would take over $200,000 to litigate. So we began to raise the money, and every time we had a meeting, you know, I would stand up and make a speech about locking the door and passing the hat or something to that effect. And in fact, we actually ended up raising over $200,000 because people began to realize what we were doing and that the voter ID law was actually voter suppression.
Although the law was upheld in 2015, the League's fight against photo ID revealed the tenacious character and perseverance of modern-day League members, echoing the indomitable spirit of the early suffragists. The League used the power of state-level advocacy and the vote to effect change in state and local legislation, while never losing sight of the grassroots role of local leagues that empower its membership.
I think the heart and soul of the organization are the volunteers. They're the ones who are in the communities making those direct contacts and really being able to see how their involvement makes that direct impact.
My mom was really active in Tacoma, Washington, and she used to go ask for money. And they did this billboard thing, this anti-billboard. They got the billboards off of the highways. So that always impressed me.
A member of my church invited me to the first meeting, and it just took off from there. And this has been a member of a lot of organizations in our community, but the League of Women Voters has always been foremost.
I've been a League member at two different phases of my life. Early on as a young professional, and then life got real busy, but it was one of the organizations that I knew that upon retirement I wanted to rejoin. And I actually ended up joining again before I retired and have been an active member for maybe about 18 years at this point.
Well, I was actually born a Canadian, and I was a Canadian until 2006. And at that point I was doing advocacy work, mental health advocacy work. And since I was telling everybody else to vote, I thought it was about time that I took the plunge. So I became a citizen, and concurrent with becoming a citizen, I joined the League.
So it was really funny. I work at a pretty big place in Madison, and the League was actually doing voter outreach. I got an email that was like, hey, if you're not registered to vote, the League of Women Voters is gonna be in the cafeteria. Go for it. And I was like, that's super cool. I'm already registered, but what is this? And then I did a bit of internet stalking. And I was like, yeah, I think this is something that I can get behind. And I kind of just showed up to a meeting one day. And then the rest is history.
Throughout the League's history, local leagues have been connected by a common purpose: every Wisconsin woman an intelligent voter. Local leagues were encouraged to bring candidates before the voters, a sign of the League's trademark candidate forums to come. And they offered unbiased statements on the views and qualifications of the candidates to become the respected, nonpartisan candidate answers delivered today on our Vote 411 platform.
I have two sons, and my husband and I would be very surprised if either of them ever missed an election. And they used to like to go to the polls with us, especially our older son, who one day got kind of excited. He'd gone with his father, and he just shaking his head, but he knew he couldn't talk until they got outside. And when his father said, "What was the matter in there?" and he named a candidate for a local office and said, "You voted for so-and-so." My husband said, "I did?" And he's, "What's wrong with that?" He said, "He never answered the League of Women Voters questionnaire." And my son knew that because he had helped deliver the questionnaires around to libraries and other places.
You can make a big impact in a small community. So we have been a league in Whitewater since 1964. So the community really knows us. We have a strong profile, and they look to us to hold candidate forums. It's a given. So we have a great profile. We have we're very respected, and we're looked to provide that level of content, in addition to maybe within a couple of years ago and introducing candidate questionnaires.
Voter registration drives, voter outreach, and get out the vote campaigns were as foundational to the work of local leagues in the early 20th century as they are today. In 1922, the Wisconsin Rapids League secured a downtown storefront where they distributed candidate literature and sample ballots. In the 1940s, the Superior League called for meetings of the 21ers, those who would become voters in the next election, before the 26th Amendment extended voting rights to age 18. Wisconsin also earned the distinction of being the first state to have a Native American league. Soon after the passage of the 1924 Indian Citizenship Act, granting voting rights to indigenous peoples, a league organized in Odana, Wisconsin, and all of its members were of the Chippewa tribe. Newly enfranchised, they joined with the league to engage in voter education and issue advocacy.
A lot of people are probably going to say we're active in different lawsuits and we have lobbyists and so many other things, and those are important, yes, but I think the most important thing that we do is voter outreach. I mean, that's kind of why we were founded to begin with, just because women won the right to vote doesn't mean that our fight is over. And I feel like the league's most significant contribution is that we are carrying on that fight so that way others can have a voice and be heard.
And I'm the chair of El Comité por el Voto Latino, the Latinx voter outreach team of the League of Women Voters of Milwaukee County. I have been a member of the League of Women Voters for approximately 2 years. I was interested in a nonpartisan organization that would be effective at working with me to outreach into Milwaukee's Latinx community. My interests, which I thought were aligned with the League's interest, was to provide quality, nonpartisan information to the Latinx community in order to increase the number of Latinx voters, and to provide materials, particularly bilingual materials, that would best inform them of their rights and knowledge of candidates and other relevant policy issues along the way.
And so many years later, I moved to Wisconsin Rapids. It was 1990, and I found League had changed. And the reason I say that it has changed is that now we are more focused on action. We went from choosing a study to studying it, using the internet for our information and coming to a conclusion, and then adopting it as part of our agenda, and then we worked on action. And I think that final part is the biggest change in the League from the 50s to the 90s.
Oh, our league is amazing. We do a lot of education. We have monthly lunch and learns, which are an educational luncheon. And we get experts from all over the state to come and talk about important issues that affect our community.
And I think my favorite thing is we'll have our unit discussions and stuff, and sometimes we'll just, from the forums, we'll get off on a topic and we're like, why don't we go do this? Why don't we go be involved in this community, or why don't we go join this protest? So most recently we went and did voter registration at the Magic Festival, so the Magic Festival in Madison is basically the Gay Pride Parade, but it's a festival. And there are members in our campus unit that are members of the LGBT community, including myself. And you could just really tell that people were surprised. That's how we can make a better difference. You need to be in those communities for them to want to like receive your help.
Again, something fun that we've done in our local community is the League, for over about 15 years now, has participated annually by having an appearance in the 4th of July parade in our community, which is a big thing because we're a small town, and so it's pretty cool. And the League, we've had award-winning floats in the 4th of July parade, and in one year we created Lady Liberty costumes for ourselves. And we actually danced down Main Street as Lady Liberties, and that was a pretty fun thing to do. And I think it kind of broke through that perception of the League as being kind of staid and like boring. But no, we can have fun with this.
I have learned that a grassroots organization can do much, but changing one local community does not change the nation. And when we work together, changing all our local communities, that's how we're going to make democracy work.
For 100 years, Wisconsin League members have used the power of their vote and grassroots advocacy as tools with which to get great things done. Going forward, we accept no less in our continuing defense of democracy and enduring commitment to empower voters.
My goodness, I'm hugely hopeful that the League will continue to defend fair and open elections, defend and protect voting rights by all, that no one is marginalized, that the system is fair and transparent and there are no barriers to being able to vote. Very key and critical, and I see the League always on the forefront of working on that issue in particular.
I would love for the League to take up those fights as they have done for a strong and responsive government, and find allies in those areas where they can really reach more people, be more inclusive.
And what I hope someday my daughter will choose to want to discover on her own, in her own terms, what I have learned through League.